Okay, everyone, to our third annual KVH Kosher Pre-Pesach webinar. Past year's is pretty successful. Very positive feedback. Again, all questions are welcome. There was an issue with the email address askKVHKosher, askKVH@kvhkosher.org. So please submit questions via the chat, and we will do our best to get to all the questions that are asked. The plan is pretty much similar to previous years. We're going to work through the various Pesach questions and issues, first the common ones and not such common ones that come up every year. We'll also have a few new items this year on the agenda, some Pesach related and some not Pesach related that we feel are important to get out to the community. So it's now 8 o'clock, so we may begin. First thing we're going to go through is no other phones in the room, no other messages in the room. Okay. Let's see how it goes. We're changing microphones.
Okay, you can let me know if the echo is better now. We're going to begin with koshering. Koshering is always a source of many, many questions. We get every year so many questions about koshering. The good news this year, and if you'll see it in the chat, I've already posted several links in the chat. KVH is very excited to introduce this year at-home koshering. Now, every year people did call us, we did kosher certain people's homes. We definitely did not have a bandwidth to go around koshering homes in the entire community. To that end, KVH Kosher has partnered with Yeshiva or Yisrael, YOY, as it's fondly known, and we've created a home koshering service. KVH has trained extensively the students at Yeshiva or Yisrael. We've done several practice runs, as well as today we've actually kicked it off with several home kosherings today. The Bachrim from Yeshiva or Yisrael are available to come and kosher your home kitchen for Pesach. In order to benefit from the service, you can click on the link in the link KVH Kosher Home Koshering Service in the chat. Feel free to make your reservations now. Get in and get it done early. So that's a very, very bit of exciting news. The service is available in the greater Boston area, including the Sharon area. Okay, that's one bit of housekeeping out of the way. Very exciting for this year. Another couple corrections. The communal koshering right now is listed from 12 to 2, is actually being pushed back on Sunday, April 10th from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. So that will be corrected on our website, and we will send out an alert about that. The other items you can find on our website, we have links to our Pesach guide, as well as all the other the sections in our Pesach section on our website, kvhkosher.org/Passover. You can make us your agent to sell your chametz for you. We have a link for that as well in the chat. There are a couple other links in the chat that are actually relevant to the koshering section, which we'll get to right now. We're going to first go through items that can be kosher, can't be kosher. We'll go through several tips and tricks for koshering, for home koshering when you're doing it yourself. We'll go through the types of koshering, and then we will follow up on some of the links that are relevant in the chat to some of the items. In terms of types of items that can be kosher, let's go through items that can't be kosher first. You have earthenware, china, pottery, concrete, cement. Concrete and cement are actually a subject of dispute. It's a machlokas whether or not concrete and cement fall into the category of earthenware. As we know, kli cheres is earthenware, which includes china and pottery, ceramics, porcelain, etc. Whether or not concrete and cement fall into that category is a subject of dispute. KVH has come down on the side that they do fall into that category. The basic premise in the Gemara is that items, earthenware items, heavily absorb, but not everything comes out when you kosher them. Therefore, they can't be kosher. Glass is another subject of dispute, but a very, very famous one. Glass, according to Ashkenazic custom, cannot be kosher under normal circumstances. There may be other cases where Rabbanim and rabbis did allow it to be kosher during COVID, extenuating circumstances, etc. But in general, the Ashkenazi custom is not to. The Sephardic custom is to allow koshering of glass. Plastic, there are some authorities that do not allow koshering of plastic. I'd say the vast majority of poskim allow koshering of plastic. When it comes to Pesach, there are more poskim that are machmer, but yet still many that are mekel and allow the koshering of plastic. Rav Moshe Feinstein famously allowed koshering of plastic year-round, but did not allow koshering of plastic for Pesach, or suggested not to kosher plastic for Pesach. When we're getting ready to kosher an item, depending what type of koshering we do, the basic premise is it must be completely clean. Whether we're immersing something in boiling water, pouring boiling water over it, those types of kosherings require the item to be completely clean. We're talking spotless clean. Even to the point is that if there is rust on something, the rust must be filed down until it's all you see is a discoloration. Anytime there's any sort of surface abrasion or anything else, that has to be filed down. It has to be completely smooth when we're koshering for it, when we're koshering such an item. Types of items that even though we would normally kosher but can be problematic, take for example a standard mixing bowl. Standard mixing bowl would be no reason not to kosher it under normal circumstances, but except for one issue, it has a rolled edge. And if you take that rolled edge, there's so much junk, there's so much buildup and sludge that gets in those rolled edges. You think you scrub your dishes spotless, and well, trust me, we've seen it. Cater comes, everything's spotless. If you would take a little torch, and often this is what we would resort to in a commercial setting, and you would take a little torch around the rolled edge or rolled rim of the pot or pan, hold it there for long enough till it gets heated up, and you'll start seeing the black sludge starting to ooze out of there. And right away you see has not been cleaned properly. So we don't recommend it in a residential setting, koshering items that have rolled edges, anything that's hard to clean. In fact, in Shulchan Aruch, it explicitly states that when you have an item with many small holes, it's very, very difficult to clean. That such an item can't be koshered with Hagal, with boiling water by pouring or immersing in boiling water. Rather, it must be koshered with Liban Kal, which is a light scorching. And in fact, one of the common scenarios that comes up when we're koshering commercial dishwashers, you have many different screens of different areas, filtration screens and different screens to aerate the water and whatnot. When you take those screens out, often it can be a mesh metal screen, it can be just many holes in a stainless steel screen, and you take a torch over it. Often you'll see, even after it's been cleaned, you'll see it lighting up and burning all that excess residue that's stuck in those holes. So that's the basic premise in terms of koshering. It must be completely clean, and those are the trouble items, the lips, and like we said, examples are colanders, sifters, dishwashers that have screens and whatnot. There's where you run into your issues. Another item that can't be koshered, even if it's made out of material that can be koshered and doesn't have the concern of something getting stuck, any buildup in it, is items that you're concerned are going to break. And this could include, say your rabbi permits koshering plastic for Pesach, which is a common scenario. Certain plastics are susceptible to melting, even with a quick dip in boiling water. Such an item would be a concern to kosher that item, because someone may not immerse it completely. They would put it, halfway and pull it out because they'd be afraid it would melt to get disfigured. Any item where you have a concern where it would be where it could break would be problematic to kosher. Now, getting into the methods of koshering, the basic premise we always know is kabbalah kafpolta. The way the absorptions went in, that is the way we get them out. The way it was absorbed, is the way we kosher. So, take for example, and again, there are some caveats to this rule, and it doesn't apply the way some people want to apply it. It's not so simple to apply. You'll hear people say, well, I only used it at 150 degrees, so we don't have to kosher it at 150 degrees. That's not very simple. The premise of the method that which it became non-kosher is the method which we make it kosher applies to the type of koshering, not necessarily to the temperature that you want to kosher it. Various methods of koshering. You have your utensils you use at the table, your plates, your forks, your knives, etc. Those items are generally not used on the fire. They're used maybe with hot food at the table, and therefore the basic premise for koshering those items is what we call a kli. The minhag is to kosher in a kli rishon, or at least ira kli rishon, always with boiling water, even if it wasn't used with boiling water. That's the minhag. And that's all things that have indirect heat. Items that are used at the table, they're not used on the fire, they're not used in the oven. When we're koshering such items, for instance, countertops also fall into that, sinks fall into that. It's all indirect heat. In that case, we're going to be koshering with a method called Iru. We're going to have boiling. We're going to boil up water, and everyone people may remember boiling up from year to year. You boil up all your pots, fill up all the stove, and you splash it all over your kitchen and make a big mess. And therefore, one of the things KVH recommends is using an electric kettle, such as the Proctor Silex one, works great. It's got that spout. It's not too big. It's not too small. If you have a couple of them, even better. You got one in the back. You got one, backup waiting to be poured, and the other one. Those really allow you to get real close to where you're pouring, and you got that little spout on it. It can be really direct because when you're koshering with Ira, you need a direct. You need a direct spray on each and every part. You can't just pour it on one part of the sink and let it roll down the rest of the sink. So therefore, we definitely recommend those electric kettles, such as the Proctor Silex. There are other ones. KVH's preference when we send out our mashgichim, we use the Proctor Silex. We actually find it very versatile for many other things. You're on an event and you need to do. There's a couple items. Say you're at the bar needs a few items kosher. You can easily dip them into that kettle. So it's just a very versatile tool all around. The next method, which is also a very common method, and we'll talk about more the communal koshering, is Hagal, immersing in boiling water. Any item that's used what we call wet or with liquid on a stovetop, in an oven, etc., can be kosher with Hagal because the premise is it became non-kosher or chametzik with liquid, and therefore it becomes the way you kosher it is through liquid, which is immersing in boiling water. There are sometimes you'll have something very big. So the way the Shulchan Aruch describes it, when you have something very big, is you can dip it in part way. Unlike Tevilas Kalim, when you're immersing something to make it holy, to bring it up to Kedushas Yisrael, you buy something new from a non-Jew, it needs to be dipped in the mikveh, then it has to be dipped entirely in the mikveh at one time. Otherwise, it was not considered immersed. Koshering is not like that at all. Koshering is removing whatever might be absorbed in the pot or pan. Therefore, it does not have to all be dipped at one time. So say you have something tall. You've got a paddle that you use to mix a big kettle of soup. You might not have that at home, but you might have a tall mixing. You may have a tall, long mixing spoon. And it's not going to fit in your pot at home to dip. So what you could do is you take your ladle, you dip it in part way, you turn it upside, you grab it obviously safely with a rag or with a hot glove. You turn it upside down, you dip it the other way, and you're good. If it cannot fit all the way, obviously we would recommend bringing it to the communal koshering at Young Israel on Sunday, April 10th. On Sunday, April 10th, from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. And we got the big kettles over there that can fit pretty much anything that you're going to throw at us. There is the option of doing a Libun Kal, which we'll discuss in a minute what Libun Kal is. Now, the other item you might have is that it's hard to dip is say you have a large pot and you don't have something to put it in. One of the options you can do is take out what we call a hot rock. It really could be a piece of a brick, etc. Some people are selling now, something I love, they're selling special stones for koshering. You can buy a set with a stone in it. It's a piece of a brick, but when you sell it for special for Pesach, I guess you get to pay more for it. Similar to I saw in a lot of the stores, they sell matzah bags. It's a double Ziploc bag, and it's for matzah, the story of matzah. So we did get a question. They sell challah bags during the year, double Ziploc large bags to put challah in. Can you use the challah bags for matzah? The answer is yes. They're nothing more than a marketing gimmick, as is this special koshering stone. If you have a piece of a brick or really any decent sized stone, I'd say about the size of your fist, flatter is better, just easier to work with. You put it in your fire, obviously with tongs. You then take it, and you got to do this carefully. Use hot gloves, use tongs. Once that rock is nice and hot, I'd say leave it in there about 15 minutes at least. You want to get that thing really hot. You have your pot, your large pot, filled up to the top, all the way to the rim, obviously completely clean. Once that thing is boiling, you'll see it's boiling over the sides a little bit. You want to get a real nice boil over the sides. You take that hot rock and you stick it in, and you'll see that thing kind of boil over the sides completely. That's the way you would kosher a large pot. If you wanted to go with the method of immersing a large pot for Hagala, there is one more recommendation that we've made. We found it works. Most pots, I'd say even probably a 12 or 14 quart pot, probably the largest pots you're going to have. Obviously, there are exceptions, but take your largest pot. If you can get a double, the full size roasting pans like the caterers use, You can buy them in most stores. They're a little taller than your standard 9x13 roasting pan. So it's about this, the size of two 9x13 roasting pans. It's taller, longer, etc. Fill that up with water, let it boil. You should be able to take the pot and roll it as you go. Like we said, it doesn't have to be immersed completely at one time. So you get that thing boiling and you roll your pot in it slowly. As long as it reaches every spot at some point, your pot will then have been kosher. That is the general concept of the general concept of Hagal. One more point on the Eroi, when we talk about kosher with the electric kettle that I neglected to mention. When you kosher your count, it's obviously pretty straightforward. You're going to take it and you're just going to go back and forth in straight lines. Obviously, do it nice. You do it pretty slow. You want to keep it in mind where you're up to. And when you're doing your sink, one of the things we always recommend, everything needs to be dry before you start. So how do you keep it dry? Obviously, you start from the center and you move your way outward. You move your way up from the bottom up. So you start from the center out and then from the bottom up. And that way everything's rolling down and you're not working over yourself again and again. Okay. Now, the next, so now we've covered two methods of koshering. We've covered the method of Eroi, which is pouring boiling water, and we've covered the method of Hagala, which is immersing in boiling water. The next method we have of koshering is Liban Kal, a light scorching. Now, what this consists of and where it comes in, essentially Liban Kal and Liban Chamer are really the severe scorching, the intense scorching, and the light scorching are really two sides of the same coin. It's a machlokus of how much Liban you need when something is used with dry heat. Now, there are cases. So when do we use Liban Kal? When do we use Liban Gomer? In general, take something like a grill, anything used, or a searing pan, anything that's used with direct contact with no liquid medium requires Liban Gomer. And that's the intense scorching. It needs a direct heat. And we'll talk about self-cleaning, how self-cleaning relates to Liban Chamer and whatnot. Liban Kal is also a dry scorching, but it's a much lighter scorching. It's a lower heat and whatnot. And we'll talk about whether it's direct heat or indirect heat, such as your non-self-clean oven. Liban Kal is generally used in cases where there's a machlokus of whether or not something needs Hagala or Liban, whether it needs to be dipped or it needs to be scorched. So in those cases, often the poskim will say that Liban Kal, the light scorching, is sufficient. We know in halacha that whenever you need a certain type of koshering, the more severe method of koshering, the stricter method of koshering, always works for the lower method. And in those cases, Liban Kal will always work for something that needs Hagala. And when something is a matter of a machlokus, whether it needs Hagala or Liban Kal or Liban Kal suffices in those cases. The prime example that comes to mind is a frying pan. Why is a frying pan the prime example? If you look in the halachas of koshering for year-round koshering, from non-kosher to kosher, it says a frying pan requires Liban Chamer. It's a machlokus of whether a frying pan is sufficient with Hagala or does it need Liban. And when we have just one machlokus on this matter, over here the poskim that we're in this case we're machmer. The reason being is when you're frying something, often things can dry up in the pan, and they were concerned it would be direct heat, and therefore it would require Liban. Now for Pesach, we have an added kula. We have an added machlokus. We have the regular machlokus of whether a frying pan requires Hagala or Liban. We also have another machlokus of whether or not chametz is considered having absorbed something that's permissible or something that's not permissible. The basic overview is when you have chametz, say today, you're making something for Pesach. We know that chametz on Pesach is completely asur. What about today? In regards to Pesach, is chametz considered asur today? It's a little bit complicated, a little beyond the scope, but we'll just go through for 1 minute. It's a machlokus. So therefore, we have a machlokus of whether or not chametz today is considered what we call heter or isur, whether it's permissible, non-permissible, obviously in regards to Pesach. And we have another machlokus of whether or not the frying pan itself requires Liban or Hagala. Classic case would be frying schnitzel. You have chametz in it. You have your pretzel crumbs, your breadcrumbs, and whatnot. There's your chametz in there that's being fried. So for Pesach, we're mekel and we say that the frying pan only requires Hagala. In this case, Liban Kal would for sure suffice. Classic method of doing liban kal, and again, this works for a frying pan. I'd say that's completely welded one piece. Once you have handles that are screwed on, there are other points that you have to deal with. You probably have to unscrew it to verify that there's no dirt buildup at the joints and whatnot. But if you have a completely welded frying pan, I do make such items where the handle and the frying pan is one piece. You could simply turn that upside down on your stovetop and let it burn out like that. You will definitely have a liban kal, possibly a liban kal, or definitely a liban kal, and that would be sufficient to kosher a frying pan for Pesach. The basic methods for liban kal will be taking a torch, and again, there are homeowners who play around with torches and whatnot. We don't recommend it. It can be a severe fire hazard. Our mashgichim, when we train mashgichim to use torches and whatnot, every single one of our kits, and we have a stock of them, has a fire extinguisher. I can't tell you, I've seen several times where fires have started. Unfortunately, there was a case where who was at fault is irrelevant, but there was a case where there was a fire shortly after koshering several years ago. I myself had an incident where I had to resort to using a fire extinguisher while koshering. I don't believe it was my fault, obviously, but whoever's fault it was, regardless, the fact that you have the fire extinguisher is very important. Most people, once they hear the fact that you got to start having your fire extinguisher on hand, they don't really want to deal with torches, and we agree with that. Having everyone running around with torches is not ideal. The basic method is you take a torch and you heat the opposite side of the side you're torching to about 109 degrees, which is for sure above Yad Saletis, the touch to scald your hand. Obviously, like we said, we do not recommend doing this without specialized training. In certain cases, you would require a higher level of liban kal. You would have to get as high as about 400 degrees. The common case of liban kal that many people deal with is a non-self clean oven. A non-self clean oven, you can't get the temperatures of 1,000 degrees, 900,000 degrees of liban kosher. So how do you kosher it? There are poskim who say, well, too bad you can't kosher your oven. And in Chazal, it says an oven needs liban kosher. So let's talk about that for 1 minute. If you look in Shulchan Aruch, it says an oven needs liban kosher. So how in the world would Rabbanim get away with saying it needs liban kal? Now, there's a variety of reasons for it. I believe, having discussed this with several Rabbanim, I think there's a key difference between our ovens and the ovens in the times of Chazal. The ovens in the times of Chazal they're discussing are cases where the pot went directly on the floor of the oven, food went directly on the floor of the oven. It's discussed in halacha of where you have a pashtid, some sort of knish or kugel or souffle that's baking on the floor of the oven, and you have the fat coming out of it. They clearly bake directly on the floors of the oven. There are other types of ovens that people might be familiar with, a loft or whatnot, where they bake the bread directly on the walls of the oven. These are all reasons why our ovens, we do not treat our ovens like that. Now, there are unique cases where people might put toast on the oven racks, but no one bakes on the floor of the oven, the walls of the oven, like they used to. There are cases where spills happen. In almost all cases, when a spill happens, it's a liquid spill. There are, obviously, things could fall on the floor of the oven. It's usually together with liquid. Therefore, there are several other reasons, but this is, I believe, the main reason to assume that our ovens are different than their ovens. There are Rabbanim who say that even if you're koshering an oven with liban kal, the racks still need a liban chomer and should be blowtorched or put on top of the stovetop. But many other Rabbanim don't require that. Some Rabbanim say cover the racks with silver foil after you're done to avoid putting things directly on them. But again, the vast majority of our ovens are not designed to even put food directly on the racks. They're not designed to put food directly on the surface of the oven. I think that is a key reason why our ovens do not require liban chomer. Why the many Rabbanim believe that our ovens do not require a liban chomer, severe scorching. So in the case when you're doing a liban kal, it's important to know it operates similar to Hagal, where where the blius, the absorptions are being pulled out similar to Hagal. So one of the important things to take note of, it must, like all things with Hagal and Eroy, it must sit for 24 hours idle before you kosher it. The other caveat is it must be completely clean. Unlike a self-clean cycle, which the poskim who believe self-clean cycle works, it operates like a liban chomer, it burns everything out. Anyone who's done a self-clean cycle knows that when you're done with it, you open it up after it's cooled down, often you have a layer of ash in there. everything is completely burnt outside of the door, which we'll talk about soon. So the key difference between a self-clean oven and non-self-clean oven, your non-self-clean oven, you're going to be utilizing Liban Kal, the mild scorching, which you're only going to get temperatures of about 550 degrees. I believe that's the highest temperatures your standard oven operates at. And therefore, it must sit 24 hours idle like items that require E-Roy and Hagal, like your countertops, like your sinks, etc. And as well, it must be completely clean. Unlike your self-clean oven, which I recommend cleaning it anyway, because otherwise you run the risk of a grease fire, but you don't have to sit there scrubbing all these spots off. Those will get burned off. The other type of Liban Kal you're going to be doing is a warming drawer. Now, when we do a Liban Kal, we need a temperature of at a bare minimum of 375, the OU guide says, but I think many of our are going to require a temperature of a minimum of 450 degrees for the light scorching. Now, what if I have an item that can't handle that doesn't get up to that temperature, such as a warming drawer? Our recommendation to boost the temperature in a warming drawer is to use Sternos. Sternos are what's either known as liquid heat or gel heat. We do recommend staying away from the methanol gel ones, because if you're not adept at using them, that can transfer easily. And next thing you know, you have the cuff of your sleeve on fire, your apron on fire or whatnot, because you just inadvertently transferred that and then went to the stove and the fire leached onto the gel that was on there. The liquid Sternos are actually much more preferable. You do need the wicks the wicks usually don't burn that hot. So our recommendation is actually take a tweezers and pick up the wick a bit, just to make it a little, the flame a little bigger. But the benefit you gain is you don't run the risk of spilling it or getting it on your clothes and whatnot. You put 2 of those in a warming drawer and let them burn for about 2 hours and you'll be fine. That was the other method of getting your warming drawer up to your oven temperatures. Okay. Now, let's go to stovetops. We're gonna go to, so we've covered now ovens, non-self-clean ovens, microwaves. Let's just cover microwaves. There are posting who don't allow koshering microwaves for Pesach because it's debatable how they get koshered. Obviously, we all know microwaves don't operate the same as your standard oven or a convection oven. One more note: a convection oven, just for these purposes, operates the same as your standard non-self-clean oven. I don't believe they have self-clean, microwave convection oven. So a convection oven cannot be koshered the same way as a microwave. Must be koshered in the method of an oven, and that will suffice for the microwave cycle as well. It's a higher level of koshering. As far as microwaves goes, the poskim who do allow koshering microwaves, obviously let it sit for 24 hours because we're going to be koshering with steam that's going to turn to boiling water. So let it sit idle for 24 hours, make sure it's completely clean. And then you take a microwavable container. You want it to run for about 15 minutes. So you let it run for about 10 to 15 minutes. You'll see if the condensate turns to boiling water all over the microwave. You're going to move it over because the spot where the container was sitting is not really kosher because it was the container was there. Move it over, let it run for about another, say, 10 minutes, and then your microwave is kosher, according to those who allow koshering for Pesach, koshering microwaves for Pesach. So that basically takes care of all your oven type heating needs. You have your non-self-clean oven we described, your self-clean oven, your warming drawer, your microwave, and your convection oven. Okay, let's move on to ranges. Ranges are always a favorite because sometimes they break, sometimes they're easy to kosher, sometimes they're hard to kosher. It's one of those things that's literally all over the page when it comes to koshering. Talk about, we have 2 things over here. We have your most common one and we have your easiest one to kosher. I'm going to start with the easiest one to kosher. Let's go to your good old-fashioned landlord special electric coil, not covered in glass, nothing, your standard electric coil. Let's say it doesn't even have the grates on it. Great, you put your stuff directly in. Those are the easiest ones to kosher. Now, I've been in hotels, it's great. You turn those on high, let them turn red hot, the coils are kosher, done. You still have to contend with the space in between the coils, white, black, whatever it is. That's porcelain coated usually, or enamel coated, and generally not recommended to kosher that for Pesach. We recommend covering that space in between the coils. Shouldn't be anything wrong with that. Should be pretty straightforward. Take some foil, cover the space in between. or just be careful, put a trivet over there, make sure not to put any hot pots down on that area. That is definitely your easiest type of range to kosher. Now let's go to your most common range, or hopefully, depends who wins all the new legislation in various states, if you can even have a gas range anymore. But let's talk about gas ranges for a minute. Gas range is the most common. You have natural gas, propane, whatever you have by your house, depending if you're off the grid or not. You got gas feeding an open fire with an electric start or non-electric start. Either way, that's the most common one. You're going to want to clean that area in between it thoroughly, and then you're going to want to cover the burners and leave them for about 20 minutes. Now, you do not want to turn your burner on high for 20 minutes. Okay, you want to temper the space first, because that's the best way to do it safely. So I'd say turn it on low for about 5 minutes, let the heat build up. Now you're going to do maximum 2 burners at a time. If you have a standard gas range, so you have a relatively new appliance, so it's, I don't know, stainless steel or whatnot, and you got that electric panel in the back, and you cover all 4 burners, and you turn all 4 burners on high, you will break the electrical panel, the electric control panel. Okay, you will not have a stove for Pesach. You won't have an oven for Pesach. And the good news is you'll get a brand new one. It will be Pesach, and you'll be $1,000 short or $500 short, whatever it is. So we do not recommend covering all 4. We recommend covering a maximum of 2 at a time. We usually do front and back and front and back. That way it sort of distributes the heat away from that back electric panel. I'd say the same thing if you have the ones with the electric panels in the front. You want to do back and front to sort of distribute that heat. You're going to cover it well, either with a blech or with aluminum foil. So you want to get it sort of the heat locked in, but you want it to be vented. So make sure there's some space for the fire to breathe. Again, you're going to turn the fires on low, with the heat build up for about 5 minutes, turn it on medium, another 5 minutes, and you crank it up to high in another 5-10 minutes, and you'll see those grates will even be turning white. And that's actually one of the reasons that Libun is called Libun. It comes from the scorching, it comes from the word white, lavan. And you see that in practice when you do Libun, it turns white. That's koshering your standard electric range. The other option you have is to take your grates and stick them yourself clean out. It works. I personally do it. I understand why people don't recommend it. You got to be careful. Some of them have rubber feet that need to be removed before you do it. You'll also lose the shine. It's this obviously the simplest way to kosher it. I have not found in my experience that they break. I don't take responsibility for it, but I did come from. I grew up with this methodology, and I've been doing it all the years that I've been koshering my house for Pesach. I have not had an issue with it. Yeah, you do lose that shine, the shiny finish on your grates. Often you lose that anyway over time, but beware when you're doing that. On a similar note, when you're self-cleaning your oven, often they recommend taking the racks out. Again, then you're going to have to kosher the racks separately. One of the things is they tell you you're going to lose that finish on the racks. If the finish bothers you, you will lose that finish when you do a self-clean cycle. The other thing they tell you is you won't be able to slide them in and out very easily. And that's actually solved very easily with a little bit of spray vegetable oil. You get yourself some Pesach thick Pam, or if it's not for Pesach, some regular Pam, and you just spray the edge a little bit, and it will be good as new. So on that note, I don't really see an issue with it sliding in and out. But again, there is some risk to the finish on both on the stovetop grates running them in a self-clean cycle, as well as on the oven racks. Many people do it and have no problem with it. We are now going to go to the most complex. Okay, we actually have 2 more types of stovetops to deal with, and those are both electric glass tops. There are 2 types of electric glass tops. Let's talk about the more innovative one first, because it's actually easier to kosher. Then we'll talk about the most difficult one, which is becoming more common, unfortunately. The more innovative one is an electric induction cooktop. Now, induction cooktop works by conducting electromagnetic waves into some sort of ferrous metal, pot or pan, whatever you're using. You need to buy specialized pots or pans to use it on induction cooktops, with actually a caveat, which is a trick. If you want to use your regular pots, I'll put a link for that. There is a disc they make. You can find on Amazon relatively cheap, under $20. An induction diffuser plate. And say you have regular pots that you want to use on an induction cooktop. You put this plate down, which is some sort of ferrous metal, and that conducts the that allows you to use any sort of pot or pan on top of induction cooktop. So we're just getting this link up over here. Okay. Find one example for you. So one of the other things that this can be used for, one of the issues people have with induction cooktops is, say, Shabbos Yom Tov. Shabbos is not so applicable because unless you're taking something off the fire on Shabbos, but on Yom Tov, say you want to use your stovetop on Yom Tov, you can run into a big issue. Every single time you remove your pot that works together with your induction cooktop, you're breaking the electromagnetic field and you're turning off the system. So essentially, you would not be able to use it on Yom Tov, which would be very problematic. What I just posted over here, this link, is actually a disk that you can just allow it to sit there the whole Yom Tov. We've successfully, we use this on industrial level to control Bishul Akum. So you have a cafeteria or a restaurant that wants to use induction cooktops, and in fact, KVH has several of them. Every time they take off the pot or they're making something, they pull it off for a second. I got a problem. The thing just went off, so it doesn't help unless you have turned it on in the morning. It goes off every single time you take off the pot. Comes along this induction diffuser plate, and you put them over there. And just mind you, obviously you have to chain them down, or somehow they get lost every day. You chain them down where they need to be, and it works like magic. It works to control Bishul Yisrael at restaurants and cafeterias. It works for a Yom Tov issue. Obviously, consult your home safety electrician before using it the whole Yom Tov, but it's been tried and it has worked for some people to leave it on the whole Yom Tov, and the thing just keeps running the whole Yom Tov. I take no responsibility for your electrical bill, but it does solve those issues. It also solves a couple issues in our case. Koshering this for Pesach. What kind of koshering does an induction cooktop require? Where's your heat source? Do you have direct fire? No. In fact, what's happening is your pot is actually heating up the water. There's no fire from metal. After we consulted with several Rabbanim, they agreed that in most cases, an induction cooktop should only require the Irui or Hagal. So take a pot, your induction pot, fill it with boiling water, move it slightly so that you don't break the magnetic field. Let the water spill over your, while it's boiling on the induction cooktop, let that boiling water spill over all over it. And that's pretty much it, you're kosher. You still have the concern that the Ashkenazi custom is not the kosher glass. Comes along your induction diffuser plate, and you're not even putting your pots directly down on the cooktop. Magic. You can also use it now. So that's the koshering induction cooktops. Now they're becoming more and more common because of safety reasons. Insurance companies and cafeterias and whatnot are requiring them sometimes. Let's go to the other kind of glass cooktop. You basically have your coils under the glass. This becomes very problematic because your glass is never going to get to Leland Comer. And you have the other problem with the Ashkenazi custom, not the kosher glass. So we have a double whammy over here, which by the induction cooktop, we pretty much solved. Number one, with pouring the boiling water over it. Now, if you want, and being stringent for the Ashkenazi custom, we put the induction diffuser plate down, solved. You could use that induction diffuser plate on a regular glass cooktop, and that would be solved. But we did come across with another item. We've recommended it in years in the past. It's called the Lomi Cooktop Mat. If you go look at it's posted in the chat, in the group chat, I believe at 7:57. You'll see it. It's one of the first things that was posted. The cooktop mat. This thing is made to withstand very high temperatures. You can use it to cover your cooktop after you've done whatever koshering you could do to your electric coil glass cooktop. Once it's done, you turn the fires on high. It's still not, according to Ashkenazi custom, it's definitely not kosher. Maybe according to most customs, it's not kosher. It's very debatable if you can kosher them at all. Take this mat, cover it. You can actually cook directly on top of this mat. It's rated for over 1,000 degrees. We do believe it's a wonderful innovation to allow glass cooktops to be used for Pesach. The one thing you want to keep in mind is you want to keep either separate areas or completely separate mats for meat and dairy. Okay, so we've covered our cooking details. Let's get to, we're going to get the counters and sinks right now. Okay, I'm going to start with sinks. Sinks are relatively easy. For the most part, I'd say by and large, sinks are stainless steel and they are kosherable for Pesach. Some people kosher them and cover them with a sink insert. Some people just use a sink insert. Some people just kosher. Strict letter of law, you can just kosher it as long as you do it properly. Again, we recommend using one of those electric kettles when you pour your boiling water. Alternatively, feel free to take advantage of KVH's home koshering system, and we will bring our professional hot water sprayer to kosher your sinks with very little mess. Making sure your sink is idle for 24 hours. Idle means it hasn't been used with any hot water. So one of the ways to avoid this is simply by turning off the hot water, inlet from under the sink. So you don't have to worry about someone turning on the hot water and starting your 24 hours over again. You do that. You can continue to use it for cold, not a problem at all. It's a common question we get. Today we just got that question. I use a sink for cold. I spilled something in it. Do I have to wait 24 hours now? And the answer is no. As long as you make sure it wasn't used for hot chametz. In fact, well, let's just say for hot. As long as it hasn't been used for hot, we're good to go. Once you have that, you want to take your electric kettle or whatever hot water, boiling water source you're using, and you want to pour careful lines over every spot of the sink. Again, working your way upwards is crucial. So you do the bottom from the center out to the sides, and you work your way up the sides, the walls, the corners are the most difficult. But you're going to do, if you do it slowly, you can get them every spot. You're working your way bottom up. There are sinks that cannot be kosher. Like we said, by and large, sinks are made out of stainless steel, but we do come across sinks that are porcelain. Porcelain is cheres, cannot be kosher. It's similar to earthenware. Those sinks are problematic, and we recommend covering them. They do make inserts for sinks. Israel Bookshop very possibly has some. If not, you could line your sink with aluminum foil. It's a bit messy, but it works. Okay. So our recommendation for the strainers, the aerators of the sink that often can get dirt trapped in them, food trapped in them, and whatnot. And like we said, anything with small holes that can have something trapped in it requires a Lieben Kal. Most people are not adept at doing Lieben Kal. The posting we've spoken to suggested since it's not being used directly with food, simply being pogim it. We've trained our koshering team one way to do it, but pouring a mixture of hot water and any detergent. You use your floor cleaner, anything that's really foul flavor that's going to foul it up. Simply take that mixture of hot water and some sort of bleach, ammonia, whatever you want to use, purple cleaner, pine sol, and just pour it over your strainer, down your drain, and lift it, take a cup of it and lift it over your sink aerator, and then rinse it afterwards. You're all set to go on those items. Counters. There are many types of counters. The CRC, from the Chicago Rabbinical Council, many of you are probably familiar with them. They do a wonderful job going through the, I don't have it printed out over here, but you can look on their website and their Pesach guide. They have every type of counter out there. The bottom line is counters break down to several types. You have composites. Composites include formica, laminates, etc. We treat them just like plastic. If they're a post, say you can kosher plastic, you can kosher the composites. So you have there are so many types that are included in composite. Now, obviously, you have to make sure that areas where there are seams and seals, you want to make sure that those areas are not cracked and there's nothing stuck inside of them before you. Those areas really need to be cleaned well. Obviously, wait 24 hours and then kosher them. If your rabbi says you can kosher composites and plastics, if not, cover it with whatever material you use. Corrugated plastic is a go-to favorite of everyone. It's available in Home Depot. It's lightweight. It's easily cut with a razor blade or kitchen knife. You can store it from year to year as long as it's dry. So I recommend corrugated plastic for if you want a simple job covering your counters. Stainless steel, treat like all stainless steel. You kosher by pouring boiling water, the same you would do every counters. There's really no disagreements of whether or not you can kosher stainless steel. It's regular metal. Now you have natural stone, and you also have stone composites. We'll get to we'll talk about natural stone first. Natural stone can be koshered. Stone can be koshered. There are rabbanim who say that the sealant they use now makes it like plastic, and therefore whatever the halach will be, the plastic will be there. But for the most part, by and large, the rabbanim say you can kosher stone, which include granite, include marble. Now we're going to talk about quartz, and now you have engineered granite. Engineered granite is essentially the same thing as quartz. You're taking your stone, you're grinding it up, you're creating whatever color profile you want, and then you're using some sort of resin to a resin composite to put everything back together and make yourself a stone resin. There are Rabbanim who want to say treat it like plastic because of the resin that's binding it. Many other Rabbanim treat it like stone because that's the basis for the material over there, and treat it like stone. Whatever your rabbi says, I'd say to me it makes sense to treat it like stone because that is the primary material over here that we're trying to kosher. But again, natural stone can be koshered. Stone resins, your quartz, your engineered granite, many Rabbanim agree to treat it like stone. Wood and butcher block can be koshered, but they can be problematic. They often have cuts in them, they're scratched, they have grooves and whatnot. They need to be completely smooth. Most of the time, when we kosher butcher block in a catering scenario, we sand it down first. We sand it down and then we do our then afterwards we pour our boiling water. That would be our recommendation for home, and you can sand it and refinish it. Generally, you're using some sort of mineral oil to refinish afterwards. Often mineral oils do not require special Pesach certification, but it's best to check first what mineral oil you're using to finish your wood countertops. If countertops that can't be koshered, or some people even after they kosher they want to cover them, they just don't feel like bothering with it. Like we said, you can use contact paper. It can get messy and whatnot, but again, there's corrugated plastic available in Home Depot and Lowe's. Corrugated plastic is a great idea to use to kosher. Cabinets, refrigerators, and freezers. These are items that are not used with hot food. Hot food is not put in them. Refrigerators often could have. Now, if you are putting hot food, which again, not recommended to put hot food in your refrigerator, but if you are, you do run the risk over there, and we do recommend it covering the shelves. Many people have a custom, even after cleaning it thoroughly, to cover their cabinets and refrigerators. Cabinets, obviously not a big deal. You want to cover them with shelf liners. Go for it. A lot of people have them in. All the power to you. That's our personal opinion, but it's not required by according to halacha. In your refrigerator, if you're covering the shelves, if you have the glass shelves, it's one thing easily covered. You can use either fridge liners. They sell them in the butcher actually. They actually sell your shelf liners there as well. They do a lot of great stuff for us. They have almost everything we can get in New York. We can now get in the butchery almost. Apart from that, in your refrigerator, if you have wire racks, make sure to perforate your foil or your fridge liners liberally. You do not want to disrupt the airflow. It can mess with your cooling. Okay. Flatware, we discussed before. Many of those items, flatware, small. Anytime you're going to have small things like the tine between the tines and the fork, you got to make sure it's cleaned very well. It sits idle for 24 hours. Pots, pans, same thing. You got rivets, you got handles, all those areas. If you take out your pot, even after you think it's clean, go look by the seams. Sometimes you'll have seams on the bottom of the pot, and you'll also have around the rivets. You got to take a knife to it or something to get all the extra gook out. I recommend actually sort of do your pre-koshering boil up. If you boil that, if you put that into hot water, if you have like a pan with boiling water and you dip it in there and you let it soak a little bit, even with some detergent, you'll really loosen it up and you'll be able to scrape a lot of that out. Wire brushes, phenomenal tool to use around rivets and around handles. You can get an inexpensive wire brush in Home Depot. You can buy them online on Amazon. Just a little wire brush, and you can brush that stainless steel. It shouldn't be a problem at all. Okay. Baking pans, roasting pans require liban chamer. Liban chamer is likely, if you have stainless steel, it can possibly handle it, but liban chamer, just imagine taking your aluminum pans and putting it in a self-clean cycle. You likely won't have any pan left. So the recommendation would not be to kosher anything like that with liban chamer. Your blech also, food often falls in it. It's going to require liban chamer. I did liban chamer. I remember COVID, during COVID, a short anecdote. We all know that there's a time when chametz becomes prohibited at Erev Pesach. After that time, you can no longer kosher with Hagal anymore. The minute it's not kosher with Hagal because chametz it becomes usher in the slightest amount, which means the purging the boiling water. There's concern it being reabsorbed before Pesach. It's not an issue beyond the scope, but the only type of koshering that's allowed after the time when chametz becomes prohibited and throughout Pesach itself is libun chamer. Someone comes, it was COVID. It was everyone's going in turmoil. What are we going to do? Someone says to me, he's like, I don't have a left fiance. I don't have a shop. This is the only way I have to keep food hot. What do I do? Of course, I have my blow torches in my backyard. I call it the biggest blow torch. I said, no problem. I said, we're going to put it on some stones over here, and we blow torches left for him. I believe it was either severely I mean, we tempered as best as possible, but when you're torching aluminum like that or untempered steel, it's likely to get ruined. Again, over there was no choice. We did it for him. We did ask Kashala. I did ask Kashala beforehand if this was an issue of worrying about something was damaging, and was told this didn't fall into that category for a variety of reasons. But there's an example of where things can get damaged when you're koshering them. You have small appliances such as toasters, sandwich makers, panini presses, electric grills. These items cannot be koshered. They're all non-stick. There is no way to kosher them. You do leave them on them, the thing is destroyed instantly. There's nothing, it won't work. Mixers, food processors, etc., definitely have a replacement bowl for them. The other part, if it's a sealed motor and it's completely clean, you can use it. We recommend getting new ones, but if it's not sealed and there's food and items fall inside of it and you can't completely clean it, we do not. We recommend not using it for Pesach. Just a reminder: the community koshering, when you're going to want to bring all your pots and pans, etc., to get koshered, is going to take place at Yom Israel on Sunday, April 10th, from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. Again, that will also be in conjunction with the students of Yeshiva or Yisrael, strong partners with KVH Kosher. Okay. When you're, again, all the things that apply to home koshering apply to the communal koshering. Make sure your pot, pan, utensils, whatever you're bringing has been sitting idle for 24 hours. It must be completely clean. Like we said, you have rivets, handles, joints, seams, etc. If it cannot be cleaned properly, we will not be able to kosher it. And another reminder: take advantage of our home koshering. The link for the schedule is right in the chat further up. The slots will be taken fast, so get your slot in there. Selling your chametz, we mentioned earlier. You can the link is there as well. You'll be able to. There's a link over there to make us to grant KVH the agency to sell your chametz on your behalf. Tefillas Kalim we'll talk about just briefly. One of the reasons is someone came to me recently and asked me something about Tefillas Kalim, and based on his question, I realized he had not been titling things. Why? If you remember that we had a big Shas Tzchak. It was during times of duress. I mean, if you remember, March 2020, when COVID first came upon us 2 years ago. No one believed it was happening, and all of a sudden, boom, everything's locked down. And I would make Pesach. You had tons of people making Pesach for the first time. You had items that needed to be titled. We didn't know what was safe, what was not safe. There were no mikvahs available, this and that. And the Rabbanim came up with various loopholes of selling it to non-Jew, doing the agency similar to Mechiras Chametz. Online, you fill out a form, they were selling your kalim for you. The problem was the concept of selling your kalim or giving it to non-Jew and then borrowing it back for him in halacha does not work if it's going to remain in your possession long term. It's explicit in halacha like that. And there are people who just forgot to title their kalim after, last year or this year. They completely forgot to do it. So a big reminder: if you have kalim that have not been titled yet, please go ahead and title them. Daughters of Israel Mikvah makes it easier than ever to title your kalim. Yom Yisrael Brookline will have the kalim mikvah open during the community koshering. I believe that they have other hours as well, but the Daughters of Israel Mikvah now has regular self-service hours. You punch in the combination Sunday through Thursday. They have daily hours. Please see their website. We have a link to their website on at kvhkosher.org. Easier than ever to just go dip your kalim in the mikvah. Make sure to give a donation while you're there. Feel free to leave a regular donation for the mikvah as well. Beer chametz. KVH Kosher does not sponsor beer chametz, does not arrange it, but we do know that the community activists, the Chayases, arrange the beer chametz every year. We do not have the information. As soon as we have the information, we're usually at the fire station on Chestnut Hill in Brighton. As soon as we have that information, we will post it on our website and send out a link as well. There are people who do beer chametz at home, burn the chametz at home. I can't say I've never done it. I don't recommend it, especially if you don't have your fire extinguisher, so that you're not familiar with doing it. I've seen people who did beer chametz at home. They thought everything was perfectly safe. They did it in an aluminum trash barrel. All of a sudden, they looked at their asphalt in their driveway was melted. So that's just a minor problem that can happen. Problems can be far worse. You can burn down your house with beer chametz, the whole thing. So if there's an option to do beer chametz at the community one in a safe way, definitely recommend doing that. The other thing to remember to do after beer chametz is remember to do bittul chametz, to nullify any chametz that you may not have found. This year, because the second day, as we know, whenever you have Yom Tov going into Shabbos, you need to cook on Yom Tov for Shabbos, but we know you can't cook from one day of Yom Tov to the second day of Yom Tov. You can't prepare from one day to the second day for a variety of reasons. What do you do when the next day is Shabbos? The Chacham instituted what we call Erev Tavshilin, based on several halachas of Maseches Veitzah. Erev Tavshilin allows us to sort of start the cooking for Shabbos on Friday, on Friday before Shabbos. On Thursday before Yom Tov goes into Friday, and therefore we can continue cooking on Yom Tov for Shabbos. So, big reminder on the Erev, second day's Yom Tov on Thursday to remember to do an Erev Tavshilin. We have the basic concept of Erev Tavshilin as well as a guide to Erev Tavshilin in our Pesach guide, which is linked in the chat. Okay. The other thing that our team, Rabbi Blumberg specifically, worked very, very hard on getting set up. This year we have a guide to the shiurim on Pesach, and we'll do it briefly. We're not going to cover the whole thing. You can find it on our website. One of the questions we got, and I have a family member who was in the situation, and other people, either because they're diabetic, someone who went through bariatric surgery, has various other ailments and whatnot. How much do I need to drink? And it could be someone just doesn't want to drink. Sometimes you see these beautiful silver bechers, and they're like 12 ounces, 8 ounces, even 8 ounces. Yeah, I don't think people understand when you're drinking by the Seder how much 8 ounces is. 8 ounces is large. I have a becher that's 8 ounces. It's beautiful. It's gorgeous, and use it for kiddush. It's fine. You go through 4 cups of that. It can be difficult, especially depending on what kind of wine you're drinking. How much do you actually have to drink? Now, believe it or not, the most chomer dekashir, the most stringent amount that's the size of the cup that someone will use of a revius is only 5. I believe it's 5 or 5.1 ounces. That is the strictest share of the Chazon Ish. No more need there's no need for a bigger cup than that. And yet you see these bechers that are minimum 7, 8. I even seen 12 ounce ones, and it wasn't a kosher lelio. So having the knowledge in advance. I'm not going to go through all the details, but I will say this: knowledge in this case for sure is power. Last year, when I was visiting with someone else for Pesach, and I went and had Erev Pesach, and I did a huge favor for them. And they realized afterwards. My wife commented to me recently. She realized all the years you're sitting there by the Seder, giving out matzah to people, especially if you're leading the Seder, you break off a piece over here and you hand it to this guy, and then before you know it, you've eaten 6 matzahs, and you're like, what in the world is going on over here? And you wonder why it's so hard. I haven't verified the story personally. I don't know if there's a video of it or not, but I have heard a story of someone went to Reb Chaim Kanievsky, the Zecher Tzadik L'Shavrav Rabba, who recently was nifter, big loss for Klal Yisrael. Asked him how much is a kazayas of matzah, and he held out his hand and he said this. Can you imagine that? This is what Reb Chaim Kanievsky showed me. I have not personally verified the story. I haven't seen a video of it. If it's true, I mean, when you do the measurements, it makes sense. We've gone ahead and done the measurements for matzah, for mar, and for both by weight and by volume, space. We've gone ahead and done the calculations for the sheer revius for the 4 cups. We've gone ahead and done the volume for those. Take someone who's a diabetic or someone who had bariatric surgery, can only drink very little, or for whatever reason they can't drink, they're elderly, they're sick, they have other ailments. Those are the most common questions we get. How much do you actually have to drink? The minimum shear of a cup is 2.9 ounces. Famously from Haram Chaim Noah, it says 2.9 ounces is a revius. How much do you have to drink? You need to drink most of the cup or most of the revius. Ideally, most of the cup. Now, if your cup is exactly a revius, drinking most of the cup, you cover your bases. So someone who cannot drink that much, all you have to drink for each cup is 1.5 ounces. When you hear that, people are like, oh, 1.5 ounces? I think I can handle that. Are there extenuating circumstances if someone says I can't do that? It's very possible. But honestly, for many people who think that it's difficult and can't do it, when they hear that in a case of extenuating circumstances, all I have to drink is 1.5 ounces, it's easier. Now, obviously, this should only be relied on in extenuating circumstances. The common shiurim that Rav Moshe Feinstein gives for Revius is 3.3 for Derabanans and 4.4 for Daraisa. But even 4.4 ounces, you get a cup that's exactly 4.4 ounces, and you're drinking just over 2 ounces. That's how much you have to drink for every cup. You can reuse the remainder for the next cup. Pour it into another bottle. You can ask your rabbi exactly how to reuse it, but it's not that much. It's not as bad as people think it is. Last year was the first time in my life where I actually went and I pre-measured all the shiurim, matzah, mar. We had a bag of. Now, obviously, you do want to eat from the matzahs, the minigas, but when you have a large crowd, not everyone's eating from matzah anyway. It goes so much faster. Everything was in Ziploc bags. The mar, the matzah, 2 kazayas for motzi matzah, 1 kazayas for one smaller share of the kazayas for korech, 2 kazayas for afikomen, all bagged up and over there. And my wife came to me after, she's like, I ate much less this year. And we did do it by weight, and there's a debate about that, but we went with the chumr, we went with the stringent amount over here, and she said, I ate so much less this year. When you're sitting by the seder breaking up pieces of matzah, you're not measuring properly and whatnot. Even if you have the charts, the matzah doesn't fit, and you're worried, oh, maybe I didn't eat enough, maybe this. Weight, everything was pre-weighed, and even once you do that, you also get a better sense when you're breaking off a piece of matzah, how much it's supposed to be. Same for mar, etc. I recommend pre-weighing, pre-distributing everything before the seder. It makes the seder run smooth. You end up eating less mar, less matzah. For those who want to eat all the matzah, go ahead. But this definitely does take a lot of the stress away from, oh, how much matzah do I need to eat? Okay. For more information about this, you can see it on our website. We have a breakdown over here, exactly the different amounts you need to eat, what you can do in extenuating circumstances for a chola, etc. We have for round matzah, for square matzah. Please take a look on our website. Okay, we are going to review now some products. What needs? First and foremost, we've got a lot of questions, not just by us, but also from other organizations. They took sugar used to be considered an item, didn't require hashgacha from year round, and didn't require hashgacha for Pesach. All of a sudden, you see it's off the lists. I have a dear friend of mine who was actually involved in doing some research on this. What happened to sugar? Why did sugar all of a sudden require hashgacha for Pesach? Now, the issue is not as bad as people may have thought, but sugar was not just sugar anymore. Now, what happened to sugar? Believe it or not, climate change happened to sugar. How did climate change affect Pesach? Apparently, because of the climate, the seasons, the harvest weren't happening right. There was too much starch in the sugar cane. Now, this obviously applies to, I believe, the sugar cane. I don't know if it applies to beet sugar, or if beet sugar is the common sugar used for Pesach sugar. You know, there's a lot of cane sugar, and the cane sugar had too much starch in it, as was explained to me by an expert in the field, Rabbi Panath from CRC in Williamsburg, a dear friend of mine, had done extensive research into this, and this is what he came across. They were using, so what do you do when you have too much starch in your sugar cane? Well, we all know, what do you do with starch in your body? You convert it to sugar for energy. Well, you do the same thing if you want to manufacture sugar. You convert the starch to sugar. How are you going to do that? You're going to use an enzyme called dextranase. I have no idea what dextranase is, but I do know it's the enzyme. It's an enzyme that converts the starch in the sugar cane to more sugar. Once you do that, enzymes are very susceptible to Pesach problems, because the source for many of the enzymes is going to be at the very least kidneys, and at the worst, it can be a chametz derivative. Being kidneys derivative as an enzyme is probably not the end of the world. It's definitely kidney shinshtan, etc. If it would be chametz derivative, obviously it would be a much more severe problem. Even in the case where it's a chametz derivative, I think everyone will agree that even if we knew definitively that dextrose was used, it is bottled. So similar to milk, which we didn't get the dairy products yet, we're going to hopefully get there soon, even though we're already an hour in. It would be bottled, and therefore purchasing the sugar for a Pesach would be the same concept as we say. If you can't get, obviously, ideally, you should buy kosher Pesach milk because the vitamins can be chametz based. But if you can't, what do we tell people? We recommend buy it before Pesach, so the vitamins will be bottled, will be nullified, and then you can use it. Go ahead and use it on Pesach. The same would apply to the sugar. but it can no longer blanketly be said that sugar has no Pesach problems anymore, as was previously thought. Okay. We're going to go through several. I'm just putting on the list over here. We have several other items that don't require Pesach certification. Now, many household items. Okay. So you have items such as bandages and this and that, even though there's additives in them. People ask us all the time, I have a bandage that has alcohol in it. Denatured alcohol, according to some Pesachim, is a Pesach problem. By and large, many Pesachim hold denatured alcohol is not such a serious problem. People say, well, the Russians drink it. Well, I don't know what the Russians are drinking now, but just because someone drinks denatured alcohol is not fit, according to many people, is considered nif. So obviously there are those who are concerned with alcohol. I believe many other kosher agencies also recommend denatured alcohol or isopropyl as a proof of Pesach with no concern. Items that are non-food items that do require, we're going to talk for a minute about items that do require Pesach certification. Parchment paper is an item that's a non-food item, but it's a food contact item that does require kosher certification. We get that question very commonly. This detergent, there are those. It's a non-food item, but it's a food contact item. According to strict halacha, liquid dish soap should not require hashgacha for during the year or for Pesach. There are those who are machmer because it's a food contact item that it should have Pesach certification. There are flavors in dish soap, there are fragrances, etc., that could potentially be a chametz derivative, but by KVH does not consider it to be an issue. Obviously, laundry detergent does not require things that are non-food items at all, and non-food contact do not require Pesach certification, according to most Pesachim. Food items that, just trying to get organized here. We're just going to jump to food items that don't require certification. Okay. Apologies for the delay. So you have non-food products that we commonly get asked are any of your deodorants, detergents, shampoos, conditioners, sprays. Sometimes you'll see a wheat berry shampoo. According to strict letter of the law, it does not require certification for Pesach. There are those who are machmer, but again, strict letter of the law does not require certification for Pesach. Last year and the year before that, the common question was hand sanitizer. Hand sanitizer containing denatured alcohol did not require it. There were people asking us questions. People were using food grade alcohol. Food grade alcohol likely would require. Most hand sanitizer was not made from food grade alcohol, but as you recall, back in 2020, people were pretty desperate for hand sanitizer, and they were using food grade alcohol for hand sanitizer. Food contact items: aluminum foil, aluminum pans, cheesecloths, other bags, even challah bags do not require hashgacha for Pesach. Dishwashing detergent, napkins, paper towels, paper plastic containers, plates, disposable plates, and cutlery do not require hashgacha for Pesach. Now, food items that do require hashgacha for Pesach, that don't require hashgacha for Pesach, are items like baking soda, cocoa powder, coffee. Eggs should preferably be purchased before Pesach. That was the long-standing minute to purchase eggs before Pesach, in case there was a chance that there was chametz from the chicken, etc., etc. But that's a custom; it's not required. KVH does recommend it being purchased before Pesach, but if someone did not and needs it, it can be used on Pesach. Very common question we get: what about fresh fruit? Fresh fruit obviously doesn't. If you wash it before Pesach. What about cut fruit, cut fresh fruit? This applies to frozen, fresh. The reason frozen is not as common is because you would have to rinse it before Pesach. So Very commonly, you can get cut apples, cut this, and in catering they get potatoes, etc. KVH does research to make sure that the additives, so it's everything's l'chatchila and above board, are not a Pesach concern. But from the strict letter of the law, whatever additives would be in there, preferably buy it before Pesach. You buy the cut fruit, cut vegetables before Pesach, rinse it off, cold water. There shouldn't be any issue with that whatsoever. Fresh garlic doesn't require, peeled garlic does require Pesach hashgacha. Some people have debated this, but the kosher experts have told us that peeled garlic does require hashgacha from Pesach. Milk does have a potential chametz concern. If you're buying milk without Pesach hashgacha, you should preferably purchase it before Pesach. Whole nuts or chopped nuts, aside from peanuts, which are kidneys, as long as they don't have BHA or BHT, don't require hashgacha for Pesach, with the exception of pecans, which should have hashgacha for Pesach, unless they're approved by the certifier who's certifying them for year-round. I believe pecans in Costco, I have to double check with the OU, but I do believe Kirkland's signature pecans are approved for Pesach. I do have to double check with though. Non-iodized salt does not require hashgacha for Pesach. Sugar, we mentioned, due to this new concern, does require Pesach hashgacha. But again, like milk, whatever additives are going to be in there, the enzyme is going to be bottled, and therefore won't be an issue for purchase before Pesach. We are going to jump into questions in just a minute, but once I have my captive audience, not really captive, there's still 25 people left. I want to talk about something that's very near and dear to my heart. It came up again with another hashgacha, but it comes up here and there. You'll notice if you look in the Pesach guide, Rabbi Blumberg attached an article that I was in the middle of writing called The Educated Consumer. The article was not quite finished, and I still recommended that he add it to the Pesach guide. This is not promoting an agenda of any sort or whatnot. We've gotten over this past year, as we're coming out of COVID and whatnot, there's more and more events, home events, public events, private events, etc. And I really feel that this conversation is warranted. We're going to do a bigger presentation about this issue in the future. What is a consumer's responsibility when it comes to vetting what the food that he's eating? Normally, you walk into a store, you look for something with hashgacha, unless you know it's something that doesn't require hashgacha. When you show up to someone's house, you show up to a shul event. Is that event certified? Is that a properly certified event or not? Often people don't even ask the question. They make assumptions. It's party planner. People bring in things. There have been stories. A friend of mine told me a story of a brisson in Brooklyn where they were setting up an entire was what we call an accommodator event. It was a party planner. She got kosher food here, kosher food there, and then they were doing omelet stations with non-Jewish waiters, cooks at the omelet stations, turning on the fires. No mashgiach present, because why do you need mashgiach for? We got the food from kosher caterer over there, and we got this and we got that, and someone forgot. Oh, all the eggs that were about to be cooked are all bishalakim. These are things that happen when you have a party planner whose the focus is of the party. Again, I'm not accusing any specific party planner of saying not caring about kosher. Obviously, if you have a non-kosher one, they don't care about kosher. But even a Jewish party planner, a religious party planner, their focus is not kosher, and an item like that gets overlooked. Or you set up an omelet station, and all of a sudden you realize you could have just traced up the entire party. You have an event that's not a fully certified event. Who just kosher the oven? You just check where the food came from. Where was that food heated up? Did it come to it? Oh, it's Andrew's food. It's this guy's food. It's Yushez's food. It's Tova's food. Well, it got here. Who brought it here? Who told you it's that? Someone recently told me that they were promised that food came from XYZ caterer. They did a little more research, pulled back the layers, and no, the food wasn't there from there at all. The food wasn't kosher. The responsibility on the consumer when they walk into an event, just because someone told them it's this and that, who verified it? Have you verified it yourself? Someone told you this was certified by KVH. It's certified by New England Kosher from the Hagal and Hamawi Hashgacha. It's certified by OU. It's certified by OK. Who told you? Have you verified that? We have certificates for a reason. The best thing that ever happens to me is if someone calls me up to verify a kosher certificate. They're there for a reason. Why have kosher certificates there if no one's ever going to verify them? Sometimes they're out of date. Sometimes they're this. And a lot of times there's an innocuous reason why a certificate's out of date. Sometimes a new one was given to the owner and he never put it up for whatever reason. Okay, there can be an innocuous reason for it, but ask. There's no certificate. There's a certificate that's out of date. Someone told you, oh, everyone eats there. Based on what? You go to an event. It's a certified event. Oh, really? Is there a mashgiach here I can talk to? Is there a certificate? KVH does have certificates. They look like tent cards. We have a picture of them on our website. It has the mashgiach signature on it. The event is meat or dairy, etc. What's going on over there? If an event is not certified, there's no mashgiach over there. It's on the consumer to verify that the food came from where it did. Which means if you cannot see the wrapping on the food that it's sealed, the platters were sealed, I wouldn't recommend eating there. Someone tells you, oh, trust me, it came from there. When that person says, trust me, would you eat in this person's house? You know this person personally. And even if, yeah, where is he getting his information from? There was an event there was a fairly large firm event, and they asked the person who was hosting it, who I don't believe was Jewish, forget about religious, I don't believe this person was Jewish. They asked, where's the food from? Oh, it came from XYZ kosher caterer. Okay, where was the food just heated up? Because they were serving hot, open food. Where did that food come from? It's heated up on site. Who koshered that oven? So you have a lot of these questions that come up on a day-to-day basis. Kosher agencies work very hard, and without the support from the consumer, it's very difficult for us to advance the cause of koshers, because someone does the proprietor, the host sees that someone doesn't care if there's a certificate or not. Obviously, we're not talking about it from a person. You're going eating at your friend's house and you bought something from a caterer. We're not talking about a situation. We're talking about events over here. Ask to see who is the caterer, who is the mashgiach, is there an event certificate? That is on the consumer. That's what we call an educated consumer. So now that I got to go off on that tangent, I'm going to open up the questions right now. Feel free to start sending in questions. And if there are no questions, we can call it a night. Okay, we got a call over here what to do about oven doors, and the truth is I neglected to elaborate on that. The concern with oven doors is that, number one, it's glass, and you have the concern that Ashkenazi customers not the kosher glass, and number two, even on a self-clean cycle, because it's tempered glass, it's not designed to get hot enough to get as hot as the rest of it. Many places can hold that Liebman Kal is sufficient enough. You're not cooking directly on the oven door. And they hold you don't need to do anything. Those who want to be careful, you can cover the oven door with aluminum foil and just tape it around the outsides with some masking tape. Works fine if you want to be concerned with it. Other places can hold, but that's not required. It is important to note though that even on a self-clean oven, the door should be treated like a non-self-clean oven and should be completely clean, spotless clean. So using some sort of wire brush or making sure, obviously make sure not to damage the gaskets, but being very careful to clean the door completely clean, treating the door of a self-clean oven like a non-self-clean oven, even if you're not going to cover it. I'm sorry, especially if you're not going to cover it. What to do with an electric blech or a hot plate? You have a Shabbos plata hot plate. You can use pretty difficult to kosher because it gets hot enough to become non-kosher, but not hot enough to kosher. I don't recommend taking a blowtorch tip. So I would, our recommendation would be turn it on, make sure it's completely clean, turn it on the highest cycle, I don't know, half hour, till it's there for about a half hour, an hour, let it run like that. And then our recommendation would be to cover with a double layer of aluminum foil and use it as follows. We got a common question issue that's coming up, and it's very unfortunate. Coconut sugar is often, there are processing aids that are used over there that are a chametz problem. Coconut sugar should not be used for Pesach without kosher Pesach. And the question is, why don't we see any coconut sugar? The London Basin used to, I believe London Basin was certifying a coconut sugar place. There were several others as well. Apparently, one of the big coconut sugar suppliers that was doing Pesach went out of business during COVID. Another concern happened with one of the distributors. They found the coconut sugar to be heavily infested. Those two items coupled together, I know there's people still scrambling to find it, but it does not appear to be that there is coconut sugar on the market. Paper plates are not, KVH does not find paper plates to be a concern for Pesach, plasticware as well. So all of you disposable goods that do not require special Pesach hashgacha. So frozen vegetables, great question. One item to watch out with frozen vegetables is kitnia. If your minhag is to eat kitnias, it's less of an issue because often a lot of the mixed bags you have string beans, corn mixed in with your carrots, etc. Frozen vegetables is no different than cut vegetables. There is a concern that there's a minute amount of additive being added that has a potential to be a chametz derivative. Not likely in the US, but it has a potential to be a chametz derivative, for sure kitnias derivative. In the case where it's a kitnias derivative, it wouldn't be a problem because it's buckle and it's what we call kitnias shishnan. It's completely completely reformed from its original status of kitnias. When it's a chametz derivative, it would be an issue. Now, even so, if you purchase it before Pesach, just like milk, that minute amount that they're using as a processing aid in the water, as a washing aid, is butter many times over. Our recommendation is rinse it before you use it, and it's fine. No different than cut vegetables. So the only difference between frozen vegetables and I do have to rephrase that, depending which frozen vegetables. Some of the frozen vegetables are cooked first before they're frozen. So that might depend which ones. You can follow up with info at KVH Kosher. So I do take back what I just said about frozen vegetables. It might depend which frozen vegetables you're referring to. So please follow up at info at kvhkosher.org. Shaken with KVH hashgacha, is it kosher for Pesach, or does it need to say so? So that's a great question. According to all the national agencies, and I'm going to put off KVH for a minute, when you get a cryovac pack, a sealed pack from Empire, from Aaron's, Sharbor, KG Poultry, when you get that sealed pack, those are automatically kosher for Pesach. Same thing to do with all cuts of meat. When you get that cryovac directly from the source, not ground beef. Ground beef, some of them is good and some of them is not, but whole cuts of chicken, cut up chickens, cuts of meat, when they come directly from the source, those are all automatically kosher for Pesach. When it comes from KVH, we cannot stand behind it. If someone needs a specific answer on a specific case, we can follow up on that. But KVH in the same kitchen where they're doing your packing your chicken, on the same equipment they're packing your chicken, they're also packing raw breaded schnitzel. They could be packing seasoned meats. They can be doing a variety of other items, and therefore the equipment is not kosher to Pesach when they're using it. There is a chance there's a minute amount of crumbs that could make it. It's minute, and there's a possibility if someone needs to use a chicken, if someone's in great need and they need to do it, they can rinse it off with cold water. There is a way to use that chicken, but it should not be assumed that the chicken packed at the butchery or Zadie's market is automatically kosher to Pesach. Okay, so last couple of reminders. Again, we have the home koshering partnership with YY. Phenomenal partnership. Couldn't be more excited about that. We get so many requests for home koshering every year. We just don't have the bandwidth to cover it with our team here in Boston. So having the team, partnering up with the team of Bachman at YY, big shout out to Rabbi Feldman for arranging this, Rabbi Luria for arranging the knowledge base. Before we even trained them to the koshering, Rabbi Luria, Yeshiva or Yisrael partnered up with myself to train the Bachman Halacha. And another shout out to Rabbi Ari Galernt at Yeshiva or Yisrael Mechavusa for even thinking about the idea with me and bringing it to fruition. So again, thank you to the Hanhala at Yeshiva or Yisrael for making this happen. Thank you to the Bachman for joining the KVH team to bring the home koshering service to the community. Communal koshering will be Sunday, April 10th from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. For the home koshering, someone just asked, they signed up. You will get a phone call or email follow-up confirming your times. The website currently says 12 to 2. I'm sorry, the communal koshering. The website currently says 12 to 2. The Pesach guide as well says 12 to 2. For a variety of reasons, we had to move the koshering at Yom Israel Brookline from 10 to 12 p.m. There will be a correction sent out shortly. So again, like you said, the processing aids is always the thing. If you don't know what to say, oh yeah, processing. Yeah, there are processing aids, and with pecans, there are sometimes automatically used processing aids. Garlic is considered what we call davar charef, and therefore, what else is being cut on the same lines? Sometimes it's being packed with grain. There are a variety of reasons it's packed in citric acid. In China, citric acid is often chametz. When you have peeled garlic, they need to have a preservative in there. The preservative garlic has a potential to be chametz. That's very common with peeled garlic. Depending on the source of where it's coming from, it could be some places are better than others. As a blanket rule, we don't recommend purchasing peeled garlic for Pesach. Someone just asked, what about their hot water chinik or their hot water urn, the pump pot, whatever you're using for hot water? That very much, it's a great question. That very much depends on your usage. In my house, I'd say definitely not. I've got a bunch of kids that sits on the counter. It can get pretty chametz thick. Sometimes I have a kid who likes to throw things in there, and you got to catch it. So in my house, definitely not. Say you have an elderly couple or a young couple and just a baby, or you just have amazing kids and you don't have a house like mine where everything just happens by itself. It's very possible you can use it. I believe my grandparents have that automated hot water thing. They keep it Pesach thick all year. My grandmother keeps it Pesach thick all year long. Other people do that as well. So it really depends on your household behavior. If it's considered an isolated place and you're careful, with it, not that it stays away from chametz and whatnot. It's in a special place on the counter and it doesn't get dirty. My house, the outside of it looks pretty dirty, and you still got to contend with people throwing things in it. We don't use the same one for Pesach. So if you can have a separate one for Pesach, good. If you need to use the same one, obviously it really depends on your household behavior. It also depends on what kind of hot water you have. If you have a pump pot with an electric panel on it, you can't really kosher it. So then you would have to really know that it was only used for hot water. I'd say for the spout on top, if you're concerned about steam going up, say you had something non-kosher or noodle soup or whatnot, that can be koshered. I'd say you would find a way to sort of tilt it on its side and pour your boiling water from your other electric kettle, your Proctor Salix electric kettle, over that, and that would be sufficient. If yours was dirty and needed to be kosher and it was an electric pump pot, dunking those in boiling water can damage them. Don't recommend it. Okay. Yes. Oh, very important. The Stop and Shop list. This has been a pet peeve of mine because I met with Stop and Shop earlier in the year, hoping to avoid this. Stop and Shop publishes a long list, and then KVH calls a list from various agencies asking them, which products have you done special Pesach runs for? And we get all this information together, stuff that should be available in Stop and Shop at Shaw's and Market Basket, etc. And then consumers go there and like, it's not there. I didn't see it. And what's going on over there? Stop and Shop is very graciously the past few years provides us a big table of all the stores that should be carrying grocery items, frozen items, dairy items. So one thing I actually just learned very recently is the dairy they're referring to is not necessarily the dairy that you're used to. Someone only eats special dairy like Hagal Yisrael, and that is the dairy Stop and Shop is referring to. You get your whole and cheese over there, your Stark, whatever they're carrying this year, the Pesach ice cream. That's the frozen dairy they're referring to. You'll say, well, what about the cream cheese that has OUP in the date code? That's not even the one they're referring to. And I recently spoke to them like, oh, there's a special for Passover. Here's what's going on. They take that stuff out, whether it's the cottage cheese, the cream cheese, whatever else was supposed to be there, if it got there, if it got to the right store, didn't get to the right store, even if it does get there, they take it and they just put it into regular inventory. So what happens? Your neighbor Frank, who doesn't care about Pesach because he's not Jewish, is buying out your kosher Pesach cottage cheese because it's been put all together. So hopefully by next year, we will have a special Pesach that they will take the Pesach Stop and Shop brand cream cheese or Philadelphia cream cheese, whichever ones are set for Pesach, take it out of the regular inventory and market it especially for Pesach so people will see it. I hope that doesn't cause them to raise prices as well. But that's the short part of what's happening. All your neighbors who don't observe Pesach are buying your Pesach products because they're not set aside for Pesach. I hope next year that hopefully that changes by next year. The dairy list, you can find it. You can go look up the link further up, and you go to the Pesach section. The Kosher Pesach dairy is one of the links in our Pesach section. You can continue to send questions to info@kvhkosher.org. Again, feel free to review our Pesach section on our website, and I'm wishing everyone a good night and Chag Kosher v'Sameach. Looking forward to many more of these communal presentations. Have a good night.